The viewports of Orbit Haven were less like windows and more like cataracts on a dying eye. They were thick, clouded with decades of microabrasions from space dust, and greasy from the condensation of too many people breathing recycled air. Through the grime, the planet Ortis IV spun in a slow, agonizing rotation. It was not a blue marble nor a lush green jewel. It was a charcoal briquette, a spherical tombstone, still smoldering from a fire that had ostensibly been extinguished 10 years ago. Dr. Rowan Hale stood by the reinforced glass, a mug of lukewarm synthetic coffee in his hand. He watched the terminator line of the planet where day met night. On Ortis IV, the day did not bring light. It brought visibility to the scars. From this altitude, the craters looked like pockmarks, but Rowan knew them to be mass graves of geology and geography. He had run across those ridgelines when they were burning. He had triaged soldiers and civilians alike in mud that boiled. The station groaned. It was a low, subsonic vibration that traveled through the floor plating and up into the soles of his boots. Orbit Haven was a collection of rusted modules, bolted together by optimism and budget cuts drifting in the debris belt of the ruined planet. It was a place for people who had nowhere else to go, or for people who wanted to be nowhere. Rowan finished his coffee grimacing at the chemical aftertaste and turned his back on the planet. He walked back into the noise. The rusted halo was technically a bar. Functionally, it was a living room for the displaced, a negotiation table for smugglers, and in the back corner where the lighting was slightly better, a trauma center. "Hold still," Rowan said, his voice a low rumble that cut through the thumping bass of the bar's music. "Unless you want a scar that looks like a centipede signed its name on your bicep." The patient, a sulfur miner named Kale, grunted and tried to pull his arm away. "It stings, doctor. Are you sure you used the numbing spray?" "I used enough to numb a horse, Kale. You have just saturated your bloodstream with enough cheap whiskey to neutralize a chemical weapon. The interaction is reducing the efficacy." Rowan's hands were steady. He wore latex gloves that had been washed and sterilized 3 times, a testament to the supply shortages on the rim. The needle flashed under the singular bright halogen lamp he had rigged up over the booth. "You charge too much," Kale slurred, watching the thread pull the skin of his forearm together. "It is a package deal," Rowan murmured, tying off the suture with a deft flick of his wrist. "You get the bar fight, the adrenaline, the regret, and the medical attention. The stitching is free. You are paying for my patience." Rowan snipped the thread and peeled off his gloves. He tossed them into a biohazard bin that looked suspiciously like a modified trash can. "Keep it dry for 24 hours. If it turns green, come back. If it turns black, cut it off yourself, because I am not dealing with gangrene this week." Kale threw a credit chip onto the metal table. It clattered, spinning to a halt near a stain that had been there since the station was commissioned. "You are a ray of sunshine, Hale. Real joy to be around." "I am a delight," Rowan replied, his face immobile. "Go drink water." As the miner stumbled back toward the bar counter, a tall figure slid into the booth opposite Rowan. Jax Mara, the owner of the rusted halo, wiped his hands on a rag that was arguably dirtier than the table he was cleaning. Jax was a man composed entirely of sharp angles and nervous energy, the kind of person who checked the exits every time he entered a room. "Another satisfied customer," Jax said, nodding at Kale's retreating back. "You know most doctors charge extra for the bedside manner. You give the sarcasm away for free. It is bad business." Rowan picked up a scanner and began wiping it down with an alcohol pad. "I am not running a business, Jax. I am running a penance." Jax's smile faltered, just for a fraction of a second. He leaned in, lowering his voice below the roar of the crowd. "You are running a charity for idiots who cannot handle their liquor. You know, I heard a transport docked from the core systems this morning. They are looking for medical officers. Proper pay. Real equipment. Uniforms that do not smell like engine grease." Rowan did not look up from the scanner. "I like grease. It keeps the joints moving. You hate it here. Jax pressed his eyes, darting to the window, where Ortis 4 loomed. You hate looking at that rock. You think I do not see you staring at it. You were down there, Rowan. You did your time. You do not have to live in the nosebleed section of the graveyard. Rowan paused. His thumb traced the edge of the scanner. The memory of the evacuation order flashed in his mind, the static-filled voice of command, telling him that the civilian transport was too heavy, that the fuel margins were too tight, that the 300 souls on board were acceptable losses. He remembered severing the comms link. He remembered staying. I was not discharged for my charming personality, Jax, Rowan said quietly. I was discharged for insubordination. The core systems do not hire doctors who prioritize patients over logistics. You saved 200 people that day, Jax argued, though it was an old argument worn smooth like a river stone. And buried 100, Rowan corrected. He stood up, the metal joints of his knee brace clicking softly. I have work to do. Rowan walked to the far wall of the makeshift clinic. There, amidst the peeling paint and scrawled graffiti, was a scorch mark. It was shaped like a handprint burned into the metal bulkhead during a fire 3 years ago, when a localized atmosphere scrubber had exploded. It was soot grease and polymerized paint. Rowan took a clean rag from his pocket, sprayed it with solvent, and began to scrub. It was a ritual. Every night, around 2100 hours, he cleaned the spot. He scrubbed until his shoulder burned and his knuckles turned white. The black stain never lifted. It never faded. It was part of the metal, now an alloy of mistake and consequence. It is not coming off, Doc, a passing spacer shouted, laughing. Rowan ignored him. The friction was the point. The effort was the point. If he scrubbed hard enough, maybe he could forget the feeling of blood drying on his hands that he could not wash away, no matter how much water he used. The bell above the airlock door chimed a harsh, discordant sound that signaled new arrivals. The atmosphere in the rusted halo shifted. It was subtle, a change in air pressure, rather than a noise. Rowan stopped scrubbing. He turned his back to the wall, watching the door. 3 figures walked in. They were not the usual clientele. The usual crowd wore utilitarian gray jumpsuits, heavy magnetic boots, and the hollow expressions of deep space laborers. These 3 moved differently. Leading them was a woman who looked too clean for this sector. She wore a long coat of distressed leather that looked fashionable rather than functional. Her hair was pulled back, revealing a face that was striking not just for its beauty, but for its alertness. Her eyes swept the room, cataloging threats, exits, and opportunities in a single heartbeat. This was Nira Ashen. She walked with a coiled grace, her hand hovering near her hip, where a heavy wrench hung from a belt loop, though Rowan suspected the wrench was just a prop for something more lethal. Behind her, and slightly protected by her shadow, was another young woman. She was smaller, wrapped in a hooded cloak that shimmered slightly under the erratic neon lights. When she pushed the hood back, the bar seemed to get brighter. It wasn't a physical light, but a presence. She had eyes that were dark, yet they seemed to catch every photon in the room and reflect it back with amplified intensity. Her skin was pale, marked with faint, barely visible tracery that might have been tattoos or veins. This was Arya. "Table for 3, Nira said to Jax, her voice cutting through the noise. "Somewhere without a draft." Jax blinked, caught off guard by the request, in a place where service usually meant catching a bottle before it hit your head. Right, near the back, by the dock." Rowan watched them sit. He returned to his scrubbing, but his attention was split. He watched Arya. She did not sit like a tourist. She sat like someone who was trying very hard to appear small, to occupy less space than she was entitled to. A small creature, a maintenance drone operator of a species. Rowan did not recognize. Something vaguely reptilian with large, fearful eyes scuttled past their table carrying a tray of drinks. The creature bumped into the leg of a chair occupied by a massive hulking human named Vorn. Vorn was a breaker yard worker, 300 pounds of muscle and bad temper. Vorn's drink spilled. A few drops of cheap amber liquid hit his boot. The music seemed to stop. Vorn stood up, grabbing the small reptilian by the collar of its jumpsuit. "You blind little rat," Vorn growled, lifting the creature off the ground. The creature squealed, dropping the tray with a deafening crash. Rowan sighed. He folded his cleaning rag and put it in his pocket. He began to step forward, calculating the angle of intervention, but someone beat him to it. Arya was standing. "Put him down," she said. Her voice was not loud. It was melodic, almost playful, like a wind chime in a hurricane. Vorn turned the small creature dangling from his fist. He looked at Arya and sneered. "Sit down, girl, unless you want to be the mop I use to clean this up." Nira was already moving her hand, reaching for the wrench, but Arya held up a hand to stop her. Arya took a step forward, a smile playing on her lips. It was a dangerous smile. "Oh, I am terrible at cleaning," she said. "I usually just make a bigger mess. But he," she pointed to the creature, "is working. And you are just taking up space and oxygen, both of which are expensive on this station." The bar went silent. No one spoke to Vorn like that, not if they wanted to keep their teeth. Vorn dropped the creature, who scrambled away under a table. He turned his full bulk toward Arya. "You got a sharp tongue. Let us see if it still works when your jaw is wired shut." He lunged. It was a clumsy move telegraphed from a mile away. Nira moved to intercept, but Arya was faster. She sidestepped with a fluidity that defied gravity, sticking out a foot. Vorn tripped, crashing into a table of card players. Chaos erupted. It was the classic kinetic chain reaction of a bar fight. The card players punched Vorn. Vorn's friends punched the card players. A bottle flew across the room and shattered against the jukebox. Jax was screaming about his insurance premiums. "Stay close," Nira shouted, grabbing Arya's arm. "We are leaving." "Not yet," Arya laughed. She was actually laughing. She ducked under a flying stool, her eyes bright. She grabbed a terrified patron and shoved him behind the bar for safety. "Get down," Rowan watched from the edge of the fray. He was not a brawler. He was a surgeon. He looked for the damage before it happened. He saw the bottle before anyone else did. A man was swinging a jagged, broken bottle of spirits, aiming for Nira's back. Arya saw it too. She did not shout. She threw herself between Nira and the attacker. The glass connected. It was a wet, tearing sound that Rowan knew too well. The jagged glass sliced across Arya's side, tearing through the cloak and the tunic beneath. The force of the blow sent her spinning. She lost her footing on the slick, alcohol-drenched floor. Her head cracked against the corner of a steel table. The sound was sickeningly loud. A dull, heavy thud of bone on metal. Arya crumpled. She hit the floor and did not move. "Arya!" Nira roared, spinning around, her wrench finally in hand. She struck the attacker with a brutal, efficient blow to the solar plexus, dropping him instantly. But the mob was still surging. They were pressing in a mindless organism of violence. Nira stood over Arya, snarling like a cornered wolf, but there were too many of them. "Enough!" The voice was not a shout. It was a command. It was the voice Rowan had used when the orbital bombardment began, the voice that cut through panic and demanded obedience. Rowan stepped into the light. He held a high-powered medical laser cutter in his hand. Not a weapon, strictly speaking, but looking dangerous enough to give anyone pause. He triggered the pilot light, a beam of intense blue cutting through the smoke. "The next person who moves," Rowan said, his voice flat and terrifyingly calm, "will receive an emergency amputation, without anesthesia." The circle widened. Vorn, who was climbing back to his feet, looked at the laser, then at Rowan's dead eyes, and sat back down. "Clear the floor," Rowan ordered. He holstered the laser and knelt beside Arya. Nira looked ready to kill him, her muscles coiled. "Do not touch her," Nira hissed. "She has a laceration to the intercostal muscles and a probable concussion," Rowan said, not looking at Nira. He checked Arya's pupils, unequal, sluggish. She is bleeding out on a floor covered in spilt gin and rat droppings. You can play bodyguard or you can let me save her life. Choose. You have 5 seconds. Nira hesitated, her eyes darting from Arya's pale face to Rowan's hands. She saw the competence there. She saw the lack of fear. If she dies, Nira whispered, I will dismantle this station bolt by bolt. Get in line, Rowan muttered. He scooped Arya up in his arms. She was lighter than he expected, fragile like a hollow-boned bird. Jax, keep the animals out. I am locking down the bay. He carried her into the back room, kicking the door shut behind him and engaging the magnetic lock. The roar of the bar was instantly muffled, replaced by the hum of the air recyclers. He laid her on the surgical table. The harsh white light washed over her. Now, without the shadows of the bar, the damage was clear. A 6-inch gash ran along her right side, just below the ribs. Blood was soaking through her clothes. Rowan grabbed a pair of trauma shears and cut away the fabric. Okay, he breathed, shifting into the zone. Let us see what we have. He reached for a pressure pad to staunch the flow, but as his hands neared the wound, he stopped. The blood was not right. It was red, yes, but it possessed an internal luminosity. It glowed with a faint, pulsing phosphorescence, like embers dying in a fire. And the rhythm, Rowan glanced at the cardiac monitor he had slapped onto her chest. Thump, 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 thump. It was slow. Too slow for a human in shock. And there was a resonance to it. As he watched the lights in the clinic flickered in perfect sync with her heartbeat. The hum of the station's gravity generator seemed to pitch up and down, matching the diastole and systole of the girl on the table. What are you? Rowan whispered. He had seen mutated DNA from radiation zones. He had seen cybernetic enhancements. He had never seen biology that tried to interface with the power grid. He shook his head. Physiology later. Hemostasis now. He pressed the pad against the wound. The light from her blood seemed to flare around his fingers, warm, but not burning. It tingled, a sensation like static electricity running up his arms. Rowan clamped the vessel. He reached for the dermal regenerator, focused entirely on the mechanics of repair. Tissue, fascia, skin. The layers of life. Suddenly a hand grabbed his wrist. It was not a weak, fluttering grip. It was iron. Rowan looked up. Arya's eyes were open. The pupils had blown wide, swallowing the irises, looking like 2 windows into deep space. The faint tracery on her skin was glowing now, shifting patterns that looked like star charts moving across her face. She did not look afraid. She did not look like a girl who had just been knocked unconscious. She looked ancient. "Doctor," she said. Her voice had changed. It was no longer the playful tone from the bar. It carried a weight, a resonance that vibrated in Rowan's teeth. "You have a concussion," Rowan said, trying to pull his wrist free. He could not. "Lie still. I am closing the wound." "You have steady hands," she observed, ignoring his command. She looked at his hand, pressing the bloody pad against her side. She looked at the blood glowing between his fingers. "You are not afraid of the light." "I am afraid of infection," Rowan snapped, his patience fraying under the strangeness of the moment. "And I am afraid of you dying on my table because that woman outside will undoubtedly murder me." "Now release my arm," Arya smiled. It was a smile that was simultaneously mischievous and terrifyingly solemn. "Do you know what you are holding, human?" she asked softly. "Do you know you are touching the heir to the Galactic throne?" Rowan froze. The Galactic throne. The myth. The ghost stories spacers told each other. The idea that there were beings out there who did not just travel the stars, but listened to them. Beings who kept the energy storms from ripping the galaxy apart. He looked at the girl. He looked at the glowing blood. He looked at the station lights pulsing in time with her breath. Logic fought against instinct. His medical training screamed hallucination, delusional disorder, bioluminescent pathogen. His gut screamed truth. He pulled his hand free, this time with force. He grabbed the needle driver and a packet of synthetic sutures. If anyone in this bar is an heir to anything, Rowan said, his voice dripping with defensive sarcasm, then I am the Emperor of gauze and antiseptic. He pierced the skin with the needle, starting the first stitch. You are bleeding. You are breakable. That makes you my patient. I do not care if you own the stars or just rent them. You are going to need 3 stitches and a tetanus shot. Arya watched him. The glow on her skin faded slightly, returning to a human norm, but the amusement in her eyes remained. You do not believe me. I believe in what I can suture, Rowan muttered. Now stop talking. You are increasing your intracranial pressure. You felt it, though, she whispered. When you touched the blood. You felt the hum. Rowan did not answer. He tied the knot of the second stitch with mechanical precision. He had felt it. He felt it like a memory of something he had never experienced, a sense of vastness, of a storm waiting to break. It reminded him of the feeling right before the artillery started on Ortis 4. The silence before the thunder. Done, Rowan said, snipping the final thread. He taped a bandage over the wound. Stay down. I need to check your pupillary response again. As he leaned over her, the station shuddered. It was not a mechanical failure. It was deeper. Outside the thick hull of Orbit Haven space was groaning. Rowan looked toward the small viewport in the clinic. The soot stain on the wall, the one he scrubbed every night, was vibrating. Dust drifted down from the ceiling vents. The storm, Arya said. She was not looking at the window. She was looking at the ceiling, her eyes unfocused. It is waking up. Rowan felt a chill that had nothing to do with the station's climate control. He looked at the girl, really looked at her, and for the first time in 10 years, the cynicism that armored his soul developed a hairline fracture. What did you bring here? Rowan asked quietly. Arya closed her eyes, a look of profound exhaustion crossing her face. I did not bring it, Doctor. It followed me. The rumble grew louder, a beast growling at the door of the station. Rowan reached for the comms unit on the wall to signal the bridge, but he knew, with a sinking certainty, that medicine was not going to fix what was coming next. Rest, he said the word, feeling inadequate. I have to check the perimeter. He walked to the door, his hand hovering over the release panel. He looked back at her. She was watching him again. Rowan, she said. He paused. He had not told her his name. Do not scrub the wall tonight, she said softly. Some stains do not come out. You just have to paint over them. Rowan stared at her for a long second, then punched the door release. He stepped out into the hallway, leaving the heir to the Galactic throne, lying on a table in a bar at the edge of the universe, while the sky outside began to tear itself apart. The warning sirens on Orbit Haven did not scream. They wept. It was a low, mournful wail that cycled through the station's ventilation shafts, vibrating against the rib cages of everyone inside. The floor of the rusted halo pitched violently to the left, sending a cascade of glassware shattering behind the bar. Jax Mara was already moving his lanky frame, surprisingly agile, as he vaulted over the counter. That is not turbulence, he shouted, over the rising din of the station's groaning metal. That is structural torque. The stabilizers are chewing on gravel out there. Dr. Rowan Hale stood in the doorway of the clinic, his hand gripping the frame to stay upright. The lights flickered and died, replaced instantly by the blood-red wash of emergency strobes. Through the thick viewport, the debris field around Ortis 4 was no longer a passive graveyard. It was alive. The starstorm was not just passing through. It was hammering on the door. Arcs of violet energy, silent in the vacuum, but deafening in their impact on the shields, lashed against the station's hull. The B-deck struts are shot, Jax yelled, grabbing a survival kit from under the register. If this storm keeps up for another 20 minutes, the bar is going to detach and become a very expensive convertible. We need to move. Rowan looked back into the clinic. Arya was sitting up on the surgical table, her hand pressed against the fresh bandage on her side. Her face was pale, illuminated intermittently by the red strobes. Nira Ashen stood between the girl and the door her wrench held, like a scepter of violence, her eyes scanning for threats that were not human. "The main shelters will be a stampede," Rowan said, his voice cutting through the panic. 3,000 people trying to squeeze into life support modules designed for 2,000. If she is who she says she is, he nodded at Arya. "We cannot have her in a crowd. Panic makes people stupid, and stupid people lash out at things they do not understand." Nira stepped forward, her boots crunching on broken glass. "We have a ship, docking Bay 7. Bay 7 is on the spinward side," Jax corrected, throwing a heavy coat to Rowan. "That entire section is locked down. The maglocks engage automatically during a Category 4 storm. You would need a plasma cutter and 3 hours to get to your ship." Another impact shook the station. A pipe in the ceiling burst, spraying hydraulic fluid across the floor. "We go down," Rowan decided. He grabbed his medical field bag, checking the seal. "There is a maintenance sub-basement under the kitchen. It is an old thermal regulation hub. Reinforced concrete and lead lining. It is off the grid, so the automated lockdown will not seal us out, but it is sturdy enough to hold if the upper decks shear off." Nira looked at him with profound suspicion. "You want to take the air into a hole in the ground, a dead end." "I want to take the patient into a bunker where the roof will not collapse on her head," Rowan snapped. He moved to Arya's side, offering her his arm. She took it, her grip surprisingly strong, despite the tremor in her hands. "Or you can drag her through the main concourse and see how long she lasts before someone notices she is glowing. Your call. You have 10 seconds." Nira looked at the chaos outside the clinic door, the patrons screaming the stampede towards the main exits. Then she looked at Arya, who gave a small, almost imperceptible nod. "Lead the way, Doctor," Nira said, her voice tight. "But if this is a trap, you will not live long enough to regret it." "If this is a trap," Rowan muttered, guiding Arya toward the kitchen, "it is a very poorly designed one." Jax led them through the chaotic kitchen, shoving aside hanging pots and pans that swung like pendulums in the quake. He kicked aside a heavy rubber mat near the walk-in freezer, revealing a rusted hatch wheel. "I have not opened this since I bought the place," Jax grunted, straining against the wheel. "I mostly use it to scare the rats." With a screech of protesting metal, the hatch gave way. A blast of stale, cold air rose up to meet them. It smelled of old ozone-dead machinery and the metallic tang of dried coolant. "Ladies first," Jax gestured. Rowan went down second, helping Arya navigate the ladder. Nira came last, sealing the hatch above them and spinning the wheel until it locked. The silence was sudden and heavy. The sub-basement was a cramped utilitarian box. It was perhaps 4 meters by 4 meters, dominated by a massive dormant thermal exchange unit that took up half the space. The walls were thick plating, unpainted and grim. The only light came from a single battery-operated emergency lantern that Rowan clicked on, casting long dancing shadows against the piping. Above them, the sound of the storm was different. It was no longer a wail. It was a rhythmic thudding, like a giant fist pounding on a distant door. Thump, thump, thump. "Cozy," Nira remarked, scanning the corners of the room. She holstered her wrench, but kept her hand near it. "Smells like a grave." "It is a Faraday cage," Rowan said, clearing a space on a workbench for Arya to sit. "Originally designed to shield the thermal cores from solar flares. It means we are blind to the outside, but the storm's electromagnetic pulses cannot fry us in here." Arya sat heavily on the bench, leaning back against the cold metal wall. She let out a breath that she seemed to have been holding since the bar fight. "It is loud," she whispered. "The sky. It is very loud." Rowan opened his medical bag. "Let me check the dressing. The climb down might have torn the sutures." "I am fine," Arya said, waving him off weakly. "You are not fine. You are technically a fugitive, Hiding in a basement during a cosmic hurricane, Rowan said, peeling back the edge of her coat. And you are my patient. In this room that outranks royalty, or divinity, or whatever it is you claim to be. Nira watched him like a hawk. She is the heir, Nira said, the correction sharp. It is not a claim. It is biology. Right, Rowan said dryly. Biology. He checked the bandage. A spot of the luminescent blood had soaked through, glowing faintly in the dim light. Well, your biology is leaking. Hold this. He handed Nira a sterile pad. The space was too small for three people who did not trust each other. Every movement required coordination. When Rowan turned to grab a scanner, his shoulder brushed Nira's arm. When Arya shifted her legs, her boots bumped against Rowan's knee. It was an intimacy forced by geometry and disaster. So, Nira said, the tension in the room, needing an outlet. You are the famous Dr. Hale, the butcher of the Rim. Rowan paused, the scanner hovering over Arya's ribs. I prefer the sawbones of Orbit Haven. It has a better ring to it. Butcher implies I enjoy the meat. I'll just fix it. I heard stories, Nira continued, her eyes narrowing, about a medic on Ortis 4 who refused an evacuation order, who stayed behind in the fire zones. Most people say he died. Some say he went rogue. Most people talk too much, Rowan muttered. He focused on the scanner's readout. Intercostal muscles are holding. No internal bleeding. You are lucky, Your Highness. A few centimeters to the left and that bottle would have nicked your liver. Sepsis does not care about lineage. It eats kings and paupers with the same enthusiasm. Arya laughed softly. It was a dry, raspy sound. You talk about death like it is a rude neighbor. Death is a neighbor, Rowan said, putting the scanner away. Here on the Rim, he lives in the apartment upstairs. He throws loud parties. We just try to sleep through them. A massive impact shook the bunker. Dust rained down from the ceiling conduits, coating them in a fine gray powder. The light flickered, plunging them into darkness for 3 long seconds before buzzing back to life. In the dark, the glow of Arya's blood was brighter. It is close, Arya said, her voice trembling. The storm. It is searching. Storms do not search, Arya, Rowan said, though his voice lacked conviction. They are meteorological phenomena, pressure systems, ionized gas. Not this one, Arya said. She looked up at him, and in the claustrophobic light of the lantern, she looked incredibly young. The galactic throne you think is a chair, don't you not? A golden seat in a palace somewhere. Rowan sat on a crate, opposite her, wiping dust from his face. I assume it is a metaphor, or a very uncomfortable piece of furniture. It is a frequency, Arya said. She traced a pattern on her own knee with a finger. The Luminar, my people, we do not rule the galaxy. We listen to it. The energy currents that flow between stars, the star storms, are the veins of the universe. If they are left alone, they swell. They burst. They destroy systems. She looked at the ceiling, as if she could see through the meters of concrete and steel to the chaos above. The throne is the focal point. It is a person. One person who opens their mind and body to become a conductor. We take the excess energy. We sing it back to sleep. We steer the storms away from inhabited worlds. Sounds like a terrible job, Rowan said. No holidays. High stress. It kills us, Arya said simply. The bluntness of the statement sucked the air out of the room. Nira looked away, her jaw tightening. My uncle, Arya continued, her voice dropping to a whisper. He was the heir before me. He was strong, stronger than I will ever be. But there was a cascade failure in the Vega sector. 3 storms converging at once. He tried to hold them all. He tried to save the mining colonies, the transit lanes, the garden worlds. He would not let any of them go. She shuddered. I was there. I was part of the circle. I saw what happened when the energy became too much. He did not die. He unraveled. He became part of the fire. He burned until there was nothing left but a shadow on the floor. Rowan looked at the soot stain on his own hands, the grime of the station. He thought of the handprint on the wall of the bar upstairs. "So you ran," Rowan said. It was not an accusation. "I did not want to be fuel," Arya confessed, tears welling in her luminous eyes. "I looked at the throne and I did not see a duty. I saw an execution chamber. I thought if I leave, if I hide, maybe the storms will calm down. Maybe they will find a balance on their own." "But they did not," Nira said softly. "They followed you, because you are the heir. You are the magnet." "I am a coward," Arya corrected. "I am hiding in a basement while people upstairs are terrified because I am afraid of burning." Rowan leaned forward. The space between them felt charged heavy with the confession. "You are not a coward," Rowan said. "You are just bad at math." Arya blinked. "Math." Rowan rubbed his face with his hands. "Ordis 4, 10 years ago. I was the chief medical officer for the 7th Forward Battalion. We were pinned down in a valley. The enemy, it does not matter who they were, was shelling us with plasma mortars. We had 300 wounded, civilians, refugees who had just been in the wrong place." He looked at his hands. "Command sent a dropship, 1. It had capacity for 100. The pilot told me I had to choose. Triage protocols. Take the ones likely to survive. Leave the critical cases. Leave the ones who would slow us down." "Acceptable losses," Nira murmured. It was a phrase every soldier knew. "That is what the colonel said over the comms," Rowan nodded. "Doctor, calculate the acceptable losses and lift off." Rowan looked up, locking eyes with Arya. "I looked at the people in the mud. A woman holding a child with a crushed leg. An old man who had lost his eyes but was still trying to comfort his wife. I did the math, and the result was 0. 0 was the only acceptable number of people to leave behind." "So what did you do?" Arya asked, breathless. "I told the pilot to take off without me," Rowan said. "I stayed. I loaded as many as I could into the caves. We spent 3 weeks in the dark, rationing water, stitching wounds with fishing line. I kept them alive. Not all of them, but enough." "And when will they found you?" "They court-martialed me," Rowan gave a grim smile. "For misuse of military assets and disobeying a direct order. They stripped my rank. They kicked me out. Because I broke the equation. I refused to let people be numbers." Silence descended on the bunker again, but the quality of it had changed. It was no longer the silence of strangers. It was the silence of shared scars. "You ran because you did not want to be a sacrifice," Rowan said to Arya. "I stayed because I did not want to make a sacrifice. We are scared of the same thing, Arya. We are scared of the power that demands we trade lives like currency." Arya looked at him, and for the first time the ancient weight in her eyes seemed to lift, replaced by something warmer. "You stayed," she repeated. "You stayed in the mud." "It was very sticky mud," Rowan deflected, uncomfortable with the awe in her voice. Nira snorted, shifting her position against the wall. "Look at you two, bonding over trauma. It is adorable. Should I braid your hair now, or should we talk about the fact that the ceiling is cracking?" She pointed upwards. A hairline fracture had appeared in the concrete above the thermal unit. Dust was trickling down in a steady stream. "She is right," Rowan said, standing up and checking the structural supports. "The vibration is getting worse. If the station takes a direct hit, this bunker becomes a tomb." "Aaron will be looking for us," Nira said, her voice dropping the humor. "If the storm is this bad, the Luminar fleet will be closed. They track the disturbances." "Aaron?" Rowan asked. "A fanatic," Nira spat the word. "He believes the heir belongs to the universe, not to herself. He thinks human contamination weakens the bond. If he finds us, he will not care about your triage protocols, Doctor. He will burn this station to get her back to the throne." "Sounds like a charmer," Rowan said. Why is he not the heir? He does not have the spark, Arya said quietly. He has the will, but not the capacity. He is jealous, and he is afraid. He thinks if I do not take the throne soon, the starstorms will shatter the sector. And he is probably right. So we have a cosmic storm trying to crush us, a fanatic, trying to kidnap you, and a station that is falling apart, Rowan summarized. Tuesday is usually my bingo night, but this is exciting too. Suddenly, the world turned sideways. A deafening crack echoed through the bunker. The entire station listed violently. The emergency lantern slid off the crate and smashed against the wall, plunging them into total darkness. Debris rained down. A heavy chunk of concrete struck Rowan's shoulder, sending him staggering to his knees. "Rowan!" Arya cried out. "I am fine!" he shouted back, though his arm went numb. "Get under the workbench, both of you." The sound was overwhelming now. The screech of tearing metal. The roar of atmosphere venting somewhere above them. The bunker was compressing. The walls were groaning under millions of tons of pressure. "It is going to collapse!" Nira yelled, her voice edged with rare panic. She grabbed Arya, trying to shield her body with her own. "No," Arya whispered. In the darkness, a light began to bloom. It started at Arya's chest, a soft, pulsating brilliance that shone through her tunic. It spread to her hands, then her face. The intricate patterns on her skin flared into blinding white existence. She pulled away from Nira. She stood up in the center of the shaking room. "Arya, get down!" Rowan roared, trying to reach her. "I can hear it," Arya said. Her voice was distorted, layered with a harmonic resonance that vibrated in Rowan's bones. "It is hurting. The metal. The stone. It is screaming." She raised her hands. She did not look like a girl anymore. She looked like a star trapped in a human shape. She placed her palms against the buckling metal wall of the bunker. "Be still," she commanded. It was not a request. It was an imposition of will upon reality. Rowan watched stunned as the light flowed from her hands into the rusted steel. The light spread like veins of gold racing up the walls, across the ceiling, into the cracks of the concrete. Where the light touched, the shaking stopped. The screeching metal went silent. The dust suspended in the air froze. For a heartbeat, the bunker was the eye of the hurricane. The violence of the storm was held at bay by a sheer wall of luminous will. Arya gasped, her back arching. The effort was visibly tearing at her. The light in her veins pulsed dangerously fast. She is shorting out, Rowan realized. He scrambled forward, ignoring the pain in his shoulder. He grabbed Nira. "She cannot hold the whole station. She is trying to lift a mountain." "Stop her!" Nira yelled. Rowan lunged for Arya. He did not grab her arms. He grabbed her face, forcing her to look at him. "Arya, look at me!" he shouted, over the hum of energy. "Look at me, focus on here. On just this room. Do not save the station, just save the room." Arya's eyes were white voids. She was lost in the connection. "Ordis 4!" Rowan yelled, desperate. "Think of the mud, 0 acceptable losses. Just us. Keep us alive." Something flickered in her eyes. The pupils returned pinpricks in the white. She saw him. She saw the fear in his face, not for himself, but for her. She exhaled a sound like a collapsing star. The blinding light retracted, pulling back from the far reaches of the station structure, condensing, until it just reinforced the walls of their tiny box. The shaking returned, but it was distant. The bunker held. Arya collapsed. Rowan caught her before she hit the floor, sliding down with her, until they were both sitting against the thermal unit. The light faded from her skin, leaving her looking gray and small. Nira clicked on a backup flashlight, a small penlight from her belt. The beam cut through the dust. "Is she breathing?" Nira demanded, crawling over. Rowan checked her pulse. It was erratic, thumping like a drum dropped down a flight of stairs. "Barely." She exhausted herself. Rowan looked up at the ceiling. The golden veins of energy had faded, but the cracks were sealed, fused. She had welded the room together with her mind. "She is the heir," Rowan said, the final doubt vanishing from his mind. "And that storm up there, it knows exactly where she is." Nira wiped blood from a cut on her forehead. "We cannot stay here. If she passes out completely, the shield goes, and the storm will finish the job." "We need help," Rowan said. He looked at the unconscious girl in his arms. He hated what he was about to say. It went against every survival instinct he had honed in the last 10 years. "We need someone who knows how to stabilize her energy. I can fix her body, but I cannot fix that." Nira stiffened. "You mean the Luminar?" "I mean the people who built the machine she is trying to pilot," Rowan said. "If we call them, Aaron comes. If we do not call them, the station breaks apart and we all die." Rowan reached into Arya's pocket. He felt the cold metal of the device she had shown him earlier, the beacon. He held it up. It was a simple cylinder of obsidian glass. "If I turn this on," Rowan said, "I am inviting a fanatic and an alien fleet to my doorstep." "He will try to take her," Nira warned, her hand drifting to her wrench. "Let him try," Rowan said. His voice was cold, the voice of the man who had stayed in the mud. "But right now she needs a hospital that I cannot provide. And Orbit Haven needs the storm to stop." Rowan looked at the beacon. He thought of Jax upstairs, probably trying to save his liquor bottles. He thought of the miners, the refugees, the people who were just acceptable losses to the universe. "This ends the neutrality," Rowan said. "Once we light this, we are in the war." Nira looked at Arya, then at Rowan. She nodded slowly. "Light it." Rowan twisted the obsidian cylinder. A piercing, silent signal blasted out from the device, powerful enough to be felt in their teeth. It punched through the Faraday cage, through the rock, and metal, screaming into the void. Here. The air is here. Above them, the rhythm of the storm changed. It paused. And then a new sound began. Not the chaotic thumping of the storm, but the deep, resonant hum of a massive engine entering the atmosphere. "They are here," Rowan said, gripping Arya's hand. "Get ready to fight." The bunker was no longer a hiding place. It was a waiting room. And the doctor was about to have a very difficult conversation with the family. The silence that followed the activation of the beacon was not the absence of sound. It was the absence of air. In the cramped confines of the sub-basement bunker, the atmosphere seemed to crystallize. Rowan watched Arya's hand drop from the obsidian cylinder. The light on her skin, which had dimmed to a gray pallor, suddenly flushed with a violent rhythmic violet. It was not the gentle pulse of life. It was a distress flare burning through her veins. "They will hear that," Nira said, her voice tight. "Even if they are in the next sector, they will hear that." "Good," Rowan said, though his stomach turned over. He checked the seal on his field kit. "Because the ceiling is about to become a very abstract concept." Above them, the thumping of the starstorm changed pitch. The chaotic hammering rage against the station's hull smoothed out, replaced by a deep, resonant vibration that made Rowan's teeth ache. It felt like the station had been swallowed by a whale that was humming a lullaby. "The cradle," Arya whispered, her eyes rolling back slightly. "They brought the cradle." Before Rowan could ask what a cradle was, the physics of the room inverted. There was no explosion. The reinforced concrete roof of the bunker did not shatter. Instead, it dissolved into a cascade of white mist. The darkness of the sub-basement was erased by a column of light, so pure it felt solid. Rowan tried to reach for Arya to anchor her, but his hand passed through empty air. Gravity detached itself from his boots. He was falling upward. The sensation was not like flight. It was like being unspooled. He felt his consciousness stretching thin, his memories rattling loose in his skull. The mud of Ortis IV, the smell of antiseptic, the taste of cheap coffee, all vibrating at a frequency he could not comprehend. Then, just as suddenly, he was solid again. Rowan hit the floor. It was soft, yielding material that felt like warm moss, but looked like polished marble. He gasped, his lungs fighting to accept air that smelled of ozone and petrichor, the scent of rain on dry earth. He scrambled to his feet, his combat instincts screaming threat assessment, but there were no corners to check. The room was a sphere. The walls were translucent, shifting with pearlescent colors, soft pinks, deep indigos, and veins of gold that pulsed like arteries. There were no doors, no windows, no visible instrumentation. Arya lay a few meters away, on a raised dais that had grown out of the floor to meet her. Nira was standing over her, looking wild-eyed, and holding her wrench, though against this technology, the tool looked as threatening as a toothpick. "Where are we?" Nira hissed, spinning in a circle. "We are inside the song," Arya murmured. She looked better. The gray was gone from her face, replaced by a flushed health that seemed unnatural for someone who had nearly died 10 minutes ago. A section of the wall rippled and parted like a curtain of water. 3 figures entered. They were tall, slender, and moved with a fluidity that made human walking look like stumbling. They wore robes that seemed woven from the same light as the walls. The leader was an elderly woman, or at least she carried the gravity of age. Her skin was like parchment, etched with lines of light that did not glow, but shimmered. Her eyes were entirely black, filled with distant stars. "Elder Sarah," Arya breathed, trying to sit up. The woman raised a hand. "Peace, child of the throne. Gravity is still reacquainting itself with your bones." Elder Sarah glided, there was no other word for it, to the dais. She ignored Nira's raised wrench completely. She looked at Rowan. "You are the human physician," Sarah said. Her voice was melodic, a multi-tonal chord that seemed to bypass the ears and resonate directly in the chest. "Dr. Rowan Hale," he corrected his voice, sounding harsh and flat in this acoustic perfection. "And if you are going to abduct my patient, you could have at least let me finish the neurological exam." Sarah smiled. It was a terrifyingly gentle smile. "We did not abduct you, doctor. You rang the bell. We merely opened the door." She placed a long, cool finger on Arya's bandage. The dressing Rowan had applied was dirty, with soot and dried blood. "Primitive," Sarah observed. "Cotton fibers, chemical adhesive, barbaric." "It stopped the bleeding," Rowan said defensively. "And the stitches are silk, high tensile strength. I tied them myself." Sarah peeled back the bandage. The wound was already knitting together, accelerated by the ship's ambient energy, but the black thread of Rowan's sutures was stark against the glowing skin. "The tension is adequate," Sarah admitted, tilting her head. "The spacing is mathematical. You sew like a machine human. But the tissue remembers the needle. It is trauma on top of trauma." "Whether you are human or air," Rowan said, crossing his arms to hide the tremor in his hands, "tissue heals the same way. It needs edges to meet. I provided the meeting point. The rest is biology." "Or destiny," a new voice cut in. The wall rippled again. A male luminar stepped through. He was younger than Sarah, perhaps Rowan's age in human terms, but his presence was colder. His robes were stiff, dark blue and high-collared. His face was sharp, angular, and possessed a symmetry that was painful to look at. "Aaron," Arya said. Her voice lost its warmth. Aaron Vale did not look at Arya. He looked at Rowan. It was the look a scientist gives a contaminant in a petri dish. "The storm has receded from the immediate vicinity of the station," Aaron announced. "But the instability remains. The throne is agitated." He walked toward Rowan, stopping just outside striking distance. "Why are you here, human?" "I was dragged," Rowan said. "Literally. Ask your transporter chief." "You touched the air," Aaron said. It was not a question. "We scanned her biometric history upon intake. Your DNA is on her skin. Your chemical signature is in her wound." "I am a doctor," Rowan said, stepping forward, refusing to be cowed by the tall alien. Touching people is the job description. Usually followed by washing my hands, which I have not had a chance to do since you beamed us into this giant lava lamp. Erin's eyes narrowed. The air is sacred. Her resonance must be pure. Human emotions are chaotic, loud, sticky. You muddy the water. Erin, Elder Sarah warned softly. He needs to answer, Erin insisted, turning to Arya. Why did you break the oath? Why did you activate the beacon on a human station? We are forbidden to interfere. We are the Watchers, not the Saviors. I was dying, Erin, Arya said, sitting up fully now. Or did you miss the hole in my side? Death is a natural transition, Erin said, his voice devoid of empathy. Better to transition and return to the flow than to expose the throne to this. He waved a hand at the station visible through the translucent hull, a small, rusted toy floating in the dark. I did not expose the throne, Arya said, her eyes flashing. I saved the room, and the doctor saved me. Erin turned back to Rowan. What did she say to you in the bunker? Rowan blinked. Excuse me. The resonance logs show a spike in her emotional output, right before the collapse, Erin said, stepping closer. She spoke to you. She opened her mind. What did she say? That is none of your business, Rowan said flatly. It is the business of the entire galaxy, Erin countered. I need to know the state of her resolve. Did she waver? Did she express fear? Did she bargain with her duty? Tell me exactly what she said. Rowan looked at the tall, imperious alien. He thought of Arya in the dark, confessing her fear of burning. He thought of her asking him about the mud on Ortis 4. Doctor-patient confidentiality, Rowan said. Erin looked confused. Explain. It is a principle, Rowan said. Whatever a patient tells me when they are vulnerable, when they are in pain, stays between us. It does not matter if the patient is a miner, a soldier, or the Queen of the Stars. I do not trade secrets for safety. You are in no position to have principles, human, Erin said, his voice dropping an octave. You are an anomaly, a glitch. I can remove you from this ship as easily as I remove a speck of dust from my eye. And the vacuum outside is very cold. Rowan laughed. It was a short, sharp bark of a laugh. Go ahead. Throw me out the airlock. But I am not telling you what she is afraid of. Because if you do not already know, then you do not deserve to protect her. Erin stiffened. The air around him seemed to crackle with static. You compare yourself to us, Erin sneered. You are noise. You are short-lived, chaotic biological noise. You think caring makes you special? It makes you weak. The throne requires silence. It requires detachment. You are nothing but interference. If caring is interference, Rowan said, his voice steady, then the universe needs a lot more static. Because silence is just another word for indifference. And I have seen what indifference does to a battlefield. It leaves bodies in the mud. Nira stepped up beside Rowan, her wrench held high. I like the noise, she said. The noise is the only thing keeping her alive. Erin looked at the three of them, the defiant doctor, the mechanic with a wrench, and the heir who was looking at the human with an expression Erin clearly despised. We shall see, Erin said. He turned on his heel. Elder Sarah, keep them contained. I must calibrate the engines. The storm is tracking us. He walked through the wall, leaving a ripple of disturbed light in his wake. Sarah watched him go, then turned her starry eyes to Rowan. He is afraid, she said softly. Fear makes people seek control. Do not judge him too harshly, Doctor. He remembers the fire as well as Arya does. I judge people by their actions, Rowan said, rubbing his shoulder where the concrete had hit him earlier. And his actions say he wants a statue, not a person. Rest, Sarah said. The floor shifted, forming 3 distinct sleeping alcoves from the soft material. We are safe here, for now. Night on the silent harmonic was a theoretical concept. The walls, simply dimmed from pearlescent white, to a deep, soothing indigo. The hum of the ship lowered to a frequency that mimicked the rhythm of a deep ocean. Rowan could not sleep. He sat on the edge of the molded sleeping pod. His uniform was stiff with dried sweat, and grime feeling incredibly out of place in this pristine environment. He felt like a dirty thumbprint on a masterpiece painting. He looked across the room. Nira was asleep, snoring softly, her wrench clutched to her chest like a teddy bear. Arya was in the far pod. She was awake. She was watching him. "You should sleep," Rowan whispered. The acoustics of the room carried his voice perfectly. "I cannot," she whispered back. "It is too quiet. I miss the rattle of the station." Rowan smiled. That rattle was the sound of loose bolts and imminent structural failure. "It was the sound of people," Arya said. She sat up, wrapping her arms around her knees. "Rowan." "Yes. Thank you for not telling him." "It was not his story to hear," Rowan said. "He thinks I am broken," Arya said. "Because I care about the small things. He thinks an heir should only look at the big picture. Galaxies, sectors, not one bar, not one doctor." "The big picture is made of small things," Rowan said. "You cannot paint a mural without pixels. Or whatever you use, brushstrokes." "Pixels," Arya repeated, testing the word. "I like that." She looked at him, and the distance between the pods felt very short. Rowan felt a pull, a magnetic attraction that wasn't just physical. It was the recognition of a fellow survivor. She was a godling, scared of her power. He was a healer, scared of his past. They fit together like two jagged pieces of broken glass. "Sleep, Arya," Rowan said gently. "I am right here. I am not going anywhere. Promise." "Promise." Rowan lay back. He closed his eyes. The rhythm of the ship lulled him. For the first time in years, he did not dream of the mud. He woke up because the air pressure changed. It was subtle, a slight shift in density. Rowan opened his eyes. The room was dark blue. Nira was still snoring. A shadow was standing over his pod. It was not a silhouette. It was a void in the light. Rowan did not ask who was there. He did not sit up and rub his eyes. He moved. 10 years of combat medicine and forward operating bases had wired his nervous system to bypass conscious thought. When a shadow loomed, you rolled. Rowan threw himself to the left off the pod, just as a beam of concentrated energy hissed through the space where his chest had been a second ago. The beam struck the sleeping surface, cauterizing the material instantly. Rowan hit the floor and scrambled into a crouch. Aaron Vale stood there. He held a slender silver device that glowed with a lethal green light. His face was serene, almost sad. "Fast," Aaron whispered. "For a human." "Room service is aggressive on this ship," Rowan said, his heart hammering against his ribs. He scanned the room for a weapon. Nothing. The room was soft, rounded safe. "It is necessary," Aaron said, raising the device again. "You are the anchor that holds her back. You are the specific point of attachment. If I remove you, she will have to look up. She will have to look at the stars." "You are going to kill me to improve her focus?" Rowan asked, edging backward toward his discarded medical kit. "That is a hell of a performance review strategy." "The oath protects the species," Aaron said, stepping forward. "It does not protect individuals who threaten the balance. You are a variable. I am solving the equation." He fired again. Rowan dove. He grabbed his medical bag, using it as a shield. The beam hit the bag, melting the synthetic leather and slagging his portable diagnostic unit. The heat seared Rowan's hand. "Hey!" Rowan shouted. "That was expensive." Rowan reached into the ruined bag. His fingers closed around the only heavy object left. The portable defibrillator paddles. They were primitive tech. Heavy, blocky, battery-operated. Aaron laughed. "You fight energy with plastic. I fight with what I have," Rowan grunted. Aaron lunged. For a being of grace and light, he moved with the brutal efficiency of a viper. He aimed a kick at Rowan's head. Rowan ducked, but not fast enough. The boot connected with his shoulder, the same injured shoulder. Pain exploded, blinding and white-hot. Rowan gasped, falling back against the wall. Aaron loomed over him, the green light of the weapon illuminating his cold eyes. "Goodbye, Doctor. You were an interesting noise." Rowan grit his teeth. He thumbed the charge wheel on the defibrillator. 100%. "Clear!" Rowan snarled. He did not aim for Aaron's chest. He aimed for the floor. He slammed the paddles into the conductive living material of the ship's deck. Thump crack. The electrical discharge did not just zap the floor. It interacted with the ship's bio-neural grid. The floor rippled violently, like a waterbed hit with a sledgehammer. Aaron, standing perfectly balanced, was thrown off his feet by the sudden upheaval of the ground. He stumbled, his weapon firing wide, scoring a black line across the ceiling. Rowan launched himself. He wasn't a soldier, but he knew anatomy. He knew where the nerves bundled. He knew where the leverage points were. He tackled Aaron, driving his shoulder into the alien's solar plexus. Aaron gasped, winded. Rowan jammed the handle of the defibrillator into the junction between Aaron's neck and shoulder, the brachial plexus. Aaron roared, thrashing. He was stronger than a human, far stronger. He threw Rowan off like a rag doll. Rowan slid across the room, crashing into Nira's pod. Nira woke up with a start. "What? Who is dead?" Aaron stood up, his eyes glowing with rage. He raised the weapon, aiming directly at Rowan's head. There was no time to dodge. "Enough!" The air in the room froze. It was not a metaphor. The temperature dropped 20 degrees in a microsecond. Frost bloomed on the walls. Arya stood in the center of the room. She was not glowing with the chaotic violet of the beacon. She was glowing with a cold, absolute white light. She did not raise her hand. She simply looked at Aaron. The weapon in Aaron's hand began to whine. The green light turned red, then black. The metal casing crumpled, crushed by an invisible pressure. Aaron dropped it with a cry as it became too hot to hold. "You attacked him," Arya said. Her voice was terrifyingly calm. It echoed from the walls, from the floor, from the ceiling. "He is a poison," Aaron shouted, clutching his burned hand. "I did it for you, for the throne." "You did it for yourself," Arya said. She walked toward him. "Because you are afraid that if I choose him, I will not choose your way." She stopped between Rowan and Aaron. She looked down at Rowan, who was nursing his shoulder. "Are you hurt?" she asked, her voice returning to normal, filled with concern. "Just my pride," Rowan winced, standing up. "And my defibrillator. I am going to bill you for that." Arya turned back to Aaron. "Rowan is not a variable, Aaron. He is my choice." "He is a human," Aaron spat. "He lives for 80 years and then rots. He is dust." "He is the dust that stays," Arya said firmly. "He is the one who stayed in the mud when everyone else flew away. And that is exactly what the air needs. Not someone who looks at the stars and sees numbers. Someone who looks at the mud and sees life." The wall dissolved. Elder Sarah entered, flanked by 2 guards. She looked at the scorch marks, the ruined medical bag, and the shivering Aaron. "Aaron," Sarah said, her voice heavy with disappointment. "You have let the shadow of the past darken your mind." "I tried to save us," Aaron whispered, falling to his knees. "You tried to control the storm," Sarah corrected. "And you cannot control the storm by silencing the wind. Take him to the confinement cells." The guards lifted Aaron gently but firmly. He looked at Arya one last time, his expression a mix of pity and fanaticism. "You will burn, Arya," he warned. "You will burn, and he will be the kindling." They took him away. "The wall is sealed." Nira finally lowered her wrench. "Well," she said, exhaling loudly. "That was dramatic. Can we go back to the part where we were sleeping?" Sarah looked at Arya, then at Rowan. She saw the way Arya unconsciously moved closer to the human, the way Rowan shifted to shield her, even though the threat was gone. The storm is not settling, Sarah noted, looking at the ceiling. The sensors show the turbulence around Ortis 4 is increasing. The local reality is fracturing. Why? Arya asked. I am here. I am safe. Because you are not where you are supposed to be, Sarah said enigmatically. You are safe, yes, but you are not whole. The universe knows when the heir is hiding. Sarah walked to the center of the room. Aaron was wrong to attack, but he was right about one thing. The throne cannot wait. The starstorm feels your hesitation, Arya. It feels your divided heart. Until you decide where you stand with the stars, or with the dust, the sky will continue to bleed. Rowan looked at Arya. She looked small again, the white fire gone. She looked terrified. I do not know how to choose, she whispered. Rowan reached out and took her hand. It was warm, human. You do not have to choose tonight, Rowan said. Tonight you just have to survive. We will figure out the rest in the morning. Sarah watched them, her starry eyes unreadable. Rest, Doctor. Rest, Heir. Tomorrow we will see if the universe permits us another day. The lights dimmed again, but this time no one slept. The silence of the ship felt heavy, pregnant with the knowledge that the real storm was not outside the hull, but inside the girl, who was holding Rowan's hand like a lifeline. The corridors of the silent harmonic did not feel like hallways in a starship. They felt like the interior of a cello. Dr. Rowan Hale walked beside Elder Sarah, his boots making no sound on the pearlescent floor. The walls curved, gently glowing, with a soft amber luminescence that pulsed in a rhythm too slow to be a heartbeat. It was a rhythm of tides of deep, tectonic shifts. You walk heavily, Doctor, Sarah observed. She did not look at him. Her eyes, filled with the shifting nebulae of deep space, were fixed forward. Even when the floor absorbs your weight, you carry gravity in your shoulders. I am used to floors that rattle, Rowan replied, adjusting the cuff of his borrowed tunic. It was made of a material that felt like silk, but regulated temperature better than a survival suit. And I am used to gravity that tries to crush me. This place, it feels like holding your breath. It is listening, Sarah corrected. She stopped at a junction where the corridor widened into a rotunda. In the center, a column of light stretched from floor to ceiling. Inside, the light dust motes danced in chaotic patterns. The ship is not merely a vessel, Sarah explained, gesturing to the column. It is a tuning fork. The Luminar do not navigate by star charts or coordinate grids. We navigate by the song. She reached out a hand, her long, thin fingers hovering millimeters from the column of light. Touch it, she commanded gently. Rowan hesitated. The last time I touched something glowing on this ship, I got thrown into a wall by a fanatic. Aaron is contained, Sarah said, a shadow of sadness crossing her face. This is safe. Close your eyes, Doctor, and listen. Rowan closed his eyes. He reached out. His fingertips grazed the edge of the light. Sound exploded in his mind. It was not sound entered through the ears. It was a vibration that resonated in the marrow of his bones. He heard a low, harmonious thrum, the background radiation of the universe, the steady breathing of stars. But cutting through it, sharp and jagged like a rusty saw blade, was a screeching, discordant noise. It sounded like metal, tearing like a scream, trapped under ice. Rowan recoiled, snapping his hand back. He gasped, rubbing his fingertips. What was that? He asked, his heart racing. That is Ortis 4, Sarah said softly. To us, a planet destroyed by war does not just look like a ruin. It sounds like a wound that refuses to close. It screams. She gestured again, guiding his hand back, but lower this time. And this is the station. Rowan touched the light again. Beneath the screaming of the planet, he felt a frantic, brittle vibration. It was a rapid, terrified tapping. Crack, crack, crack. Like a glass window vibrating just before it shatters. Orbit Haven, Rowan whispered. He knew that rhythm. It was the rhythm of a failing heart. It is a dissonance, Sarah said. The starstorm outside is drawn to it. Chaos seeks chaos. The energy currents of the galaxy are like water. They flow toward the lowest point, the broken point. Your station is a crack in the dam. They resumed walking. Rowan felt a cold knot in his stomach. He had spent 10 years trying to fix broken bodies on that station, never realizing the station itself was screaming into the void. "You call it the Galactic Throne," Rowan said, trying to ground the conversation in logic. "Arya talks about it like it is a monster. You talk about it like it is a musical instrument. Which is it?" "It is both," Sarah said. They entered a lift that carried them upward without the sensation of movement. Imagine, Doctor, a lightning rod. If the rod is grounded, it channels the strike safely into the earth. If the rod is disconnected, it melts. It burns everything around it. The doors opened. They stepped onto a walkway, suspended over a vast engineering bay, or perhaps a cathedral. Below them, raw energy coiled and uncoiled, like golden serpents. "The throne is not a seat of governance," Sarah continued. "It is a physiological state. It is the moment a luminar opens their neural pathways to the universal flow. They become the lightning rod. They take the chaotic energy of the starstorms, the anger of the universe, and they filter it. They hum the discord back into harmony." "And the air?" Rowan asked. "The air is the one born with the capacity to hold the lightning without turning to ash," Sarah said. She stopped at the railing, looking down at the golden coils. "But capacity is not enough. There must be will, and there must be a reason to endure the pain." She turned to Rowan. "The air before Arya, he was strong, but he tried to save the Vega sector by sheer force of will. He tried to hold back 3 storms at once. He expanded his consciousness until he lost the boundaries of his own self. He forgot where he ended, and the storm began." "He burned," Rowan said, remembering Arya's words. "He evaporated," Sarah corrected. "There was no body to bury, just a silence where a song used to be. That is why Arya runs. She believes that to sit on the throne is to commit suicide for the sake of strangers." "Is she wrong?" Rowan asked bluntly. Sarah looked at him for a long time. "Until today, I would have said no. But today, I saw a human doctor use a defibrillator on a high-ranking Luminar official to protect her. Perhaps we have been looking at the problem from the wrong angle." She pointed to a door at the far end of the walkway. "She is waiting for you. Go. She needs to hear the truth not from a scripture, but from a man who knows the smell of blood." The observation deck was a bubble of glass hanging over the abyss. Below, Ortis 4 filled the view, a swirling mass of gray clouds and charcoal land masses, lit by the violent purple flashes of the starstorm that still raged in the upper atmosphere. Arya stood by the glass. She was wearing a simple white tunic, her feet bare on the cold floor. She looked small against the backdrop of the planetary ruin. Rowan walked in. The door hissed shut behind him, sealing them in silence. "It looks angry," Arya said without turning around. Her reflection in the glass was ghostly translucent. "It is just weather," Rowan said, joining her at the window. "Bad weather, but weather." "Sarah showed you, did she not?" Arya asked. "The song." "She did. Your planet sounds like a bag of broken violins." Arya let out a small, breathless laugh. She turned to face him. Her eyes were no longer glowing with the white fire of the bunker, nor the violet panic of the beacon. They were dark, deep, and terribly human. "I tried to leave," Arya confessed softly. "When we first landed on Orbit Haven, Nira wanted to refuel and jump to the core systems. She said we could hide there, blend in with the billions of people on the city worlds. But I made her stop." "Why?" Rowan asked. "Because I felt it," Arya said, pressing her hand against the glass. "I felt the itch, the wrongness. I knew a storm was building here, and I told myself if I just stay for a day, if I just watch, maybe that is enough. Maybe just witnessing it counts as caring." She looked at Rowan, her expression pained. "That is what neutrality is, isn't it? It is watching a tragedy and telling yourself that your tears are a sufficient contribution. Rowan leaned against the railing. He looked at his hands that had stitched thousands of wounds, hands that had failed to save thousands more. Neutrality is a survival mechanism, Rowan said. You tell yourself that if you get involved, you make it worse. Or you tell yourself that the problem is too big for one person. But it is a lie, Arya said. I sat in your bar. I watched that man hit the worker. I knew I should stay seated. I knew that if I stood up, I risked exposing myself. I risked Iran finding me. I risked the storms finding me. But you stood up, Rowan pointed out. I stood up, she nodded. And because I stood up, people got hurt. You got hurt. The station is falling apart. She looked down at her hands. I am terrified, Rowan. I am terrified that Aaron is right. That if I try to help, I will just break everything. I am scared that the only way to save the galaxy is to sacrifice the parts of it I actually like. The math, Rowan murmured. Yes, Arya whispered. The math. Save the many, lose the few. If I take the throne, I have to become the sky. The sky does not care about one doctor. The sky does not care about one bar owner named Jax. Rowan turned to face the planet. He stared at the scars on the surface. On Ortis 4, Rowan began, his voice low. When the evacuation order came, I had the list. The command had sent me an algorithm. It weighted value based on age, military specialty, and genetic viability. It was a perfect logical list. It maximized the survival of the species. He paused, swallowing the lump in his throat that had been there for 10 years. There was a girl, he said. Her name was Alara. She was 7. She had a shrapnel wound in her leg. Infection had set in. According to the list, she was a burden. She would require medical resources on the transport. She would take up a seat that could go to a healthy engineer. Arya watched him, her eyes wide. I looked at the list, Rowan continued. And then I looked at Alara holding her father's hand. And I realized that if I followed the math, I would survive. I would get on that ship, I would go to the core, and I would live a long, healthy life. But I would not be me anymore. I would just be a calculator wearing a human skin. He turned to Arya. So I burned the list. I put Alara on the ship. I put her father on the ship. And I stayed. I stayed with the ones who didn't make the cut. You could have died, Arya said. I did die in a way, Rowan shrugged. The man who cared about his rank, about his pension, died in that mud. But the man standing here, the man who patches up drunks in a rust bucket bar, he is alive. And he sleeps at night. Mostly. Rowan reached out and took Arya's hand. Her skin was cool, but her pulse was steady. If you can save a small station today, Rowan said intensely, that is not a betrayal of the universe. That is honesty. If you try to save everything, you save nothing. But if you draw a circle around the things you love and say, this I will not trade, that is not weakness, Arya. That is the only strength that matters. Arya squeezed his hand. Her eyes searched his face, looking for the doubt she felt in herself, but finding only the granite certainty of a man who had already made his choice. I do not want to be the sky, she whispered. I want to be here. Then be here, Rowan said. The moment stretched, suspended in the silence of the observation deck. The distance between them vanished. It was not a grand cinematic romance. It was the quiet, desperate gravity of two people standing on the edge of a cliff, realizing they would rather jump together than step back alone. Then the ship screamed. It was a siren, piercing and urgent, shattering the intimacy. The lights in the observation deck flashed red. Distress signal, Arya said, her head snapping up. It is local. Orbit Haven, Rowan said, the dread returning instantly. The brig of the Silent Harmonic was less a dungeon and more a meditation chamber, stark white and completely soundproof. A single wall of energy separated the inmate from the corridor. Nira stood on one side of the barrier. Aaron sat on the other, meditating in the lotus position. "You look ridiculous," Nira said, tapping her wrench against the energy field. It made a buzzing sound. Aaron opened one eye. "And you look like a grease stain on a silk sheet mechanic." "Better a grease stain than a murderer," Nira retorted. Aaron unfolded his legs and stood up. He moved with a grace that was annoying to watch. "I did not attempt murder. I attempted a surgical correction. The human is a pathogen." "The human knocked you on your ass with a defibrillator," Nira smirked. "I would say the pathogen has a kick." Aaron walked to the barrier. His face was uncharacteristically open, vulnerable. "Do you remember the solstice of tears, Nira?" Nira's smile faded. "I was there, Aaron. You know I was there." "My bondmate was on the station in the Vega sector," Aaron said quietly. "When the Heir tried to hold the storm when he failed, the backlash did not just kill him. It shattered the relay station. 3,000 luminar. Gone in a breath. I felt her die, Nira. I felt her light wink out like a candle in a gale." He pressed his hand against the field. "The Heir failed because he was distracted. He was trying to save a transport ship that was caught in the gravity well. He focused so hard on that one ship that he lost control of the whole system." Aaron looked at Nira with pleading eyes. "Arya is doing the same thing. She is focusing on this human, on this dirt speck station. If she takes the throne with her heart tied to them, she will falter, and she will die. And everyone on Orbit Haven will die with her." Nira looked at the floor. She gripped her wrench tighter. "So what is the alternative? Aaron A, heartless Air A machine that balances the stars, but feels nothing for the people living under them." "Safety," Aaron said. "Order. Survival." "No," Nira said, looking up. "That is just a slower death. The Heir needs a break, Aaron, not a cage. She needs someone who can tell her when to stop. Someone she listens to." "And you think the human is that person?" "I think," Nira said, "that the human is the only one of us who knows how to walk through mud without getting stuck." The red alert klaxons began to blare in the corridor. Nira turned away from the cell. "Where are you going?" Aaron demanded. "To the bridge," Nira called back, "to see if your order is worth saving." The bridge of the silent harmonic was a symphony of light. Luminar crew members stood at consoles that were pools of liquid energy, their hands moving through the light like conductors. In the center of the room, a large, holographic projection displayed Orbit Haven. It was bad. The station was no longer just vibrating, it was disintegrating. A massive fracture had opened along the primary spine. Atmosphere was venting in geysers of white vapor. The structural integrity readout was flashing a critical 15%. "We have received a repeating transmission," a communications officer announced. "Audio only," Elder Sarah gestured. "Play it." Static filled the bridge. Then a voice cut through. It was Jack's. "Anyone out there that is rusted Halo main support beams are gone. We have 300 civilians trapped in the central hub. Seals are failing. We are losing pressure. If anyone can hear this, tell the doc." The audio garbled into white noise, then returned for a brief second. "Tell the doc he left his tab open. And damn it, help us." Silence fell over the bridge. Rowan stood beside Arya. His fists were clenched so hard, his fingernails cut into his palms. He did not say a word. He did not beg. He stood with the rigid posture of a man watching an execution. He was powerless to stop. Arya looked at the hologram. She looked at the tiny, fragile metal box, floating in the violent purple currents of the storm. "Elder Sarah," Arya said, her voice trembling. "We have to help them." Sarah looked at the projection, her face a mask of ancient sorrow. "We cannot, child." "We are right here," Arya shouted. "We have tractors, we have shields. We could stabilize the hull." "The oath," Sarah said gently. "We shall be the wind that steers the storm." not the hand that builds the house. If we intervene directly, if we use our technology to hold a species' structure together, we alter their destiny. We create dependency. We become gods to them. And history has taught us that gods always end up destroying their worshippers. "They are going to die," Arya cried. "In 10 minutes they will all be dead." "Then they return to the flow," Sarah said. "It is the way of things." Rowan stepped forward. He did not look at Sarah. He looked at the hologram of the dying station. "Jax," he whispered. "Kale, the little girl with the broken arm I treated yesterday." He turned to Arya. There were no tears in his eyes, only a bleak, devastating acceptance. "It is okay," Rowan said. His voice was cracked. "You do not have to do this. I understand. It is math." "No," Arya whispered. The word math hit her like a physical blow. She saw the mud on his boots. She saw the ghost of the people he had left behind on Ortis 4. She saw the pain he was hiding behind his stoic mask. She realized with a clarity that burned brighter than any star that she could not let him carry that weight again. She could not let him add Jax to the list of ghosts. "Screw the math," Arya said. She turned to Sarah. "The oath says we cannot build their house, but it says we can steer the wind." Sarah tilted her head. "Yes." "Then I will steer it," Arya said. Her voice gained strength. "I will not hold the whole sector. I will not try to balance the Vega system or the core. I am going to go down there, and I am going to wrap the storm around that station. I am going to create an eye for the hurricane so that they can weld the cracks themselves." Sarah warned, "To focus the throne on such a microscopic point, it requires precision we have never attempted. You will be using a supernova to light a candle. If you slip, you will crush the station instantly." "I won't slip," Arya said. She turned to Rowan. "Because I will not be alone." She held out her hand to him. "Doctor," she said, a faint smile touching her lips, though her eyes were fierce. "Do you want to participate in a surgery?" The patient is a space station. The scalpel is a cosmic energy storm. And the survival rate is statistically improbable. Rowan looked at her hand. He looked at the woman who was offering to defy her entire civilization and the laws of physics just so he wouldn't have to mourn a bartender. He let out a long, shaky breath. "I am going to need a lot of coffee after this," Rowan said. He took her hand. Sarah watched them. She looked at the connection between them, the human and the luminar, the dust and the star. She thought of Aaron in his cell, terrified of contamination. And she realized that perhaps contamination was just another word for alloy, stronger metal. "Very well," Sarah said. She turned to the crew. "Prepare the throne room. The air is ascending." She looked back at Arya. "But remember this, Arya. Once you open the door to the storm, you cannot close it until the work is done. If you falter, if you let fear in, you burn." "I know," Arya said, tightening her grip on Rowan's hand. "That is why I am bringing my anchor." "I am not an anchor," Rowan corrected, as they walked toward the lift. "I am a doctor, and I am technically off duty." "Not anymore," Arya said. "This shift is going to be a long one." They stepped into the lift. The doors closed, sealing them together, as they ascended toward the apex of the ship, toward the chamber where the universe waited to be spoken to. The apex chamber of the silent harmonic was not designed for human comfort. It was designed for exposure. There were no walls here. The ceiling arched high, a crystalline dome that seemed paper-thin, separating the interior atmosphere from the violent vacuum outside. Directly in the center of the room, the floor dropped away into a circular abyss. It was not a hole. It was a lens. A focusing aperture that looked straight down into the heart of the starstorm raging below. The light rising from the pit was blinding a churning violet soup of ionized gas and raw gravitational fury. It roared even through the dampening fields, a sound that vibrated in the fluid of the inner ear. "This is not a throne," Dr. Rowan Hale shouted over the din, shielding his eyes. "This is a blast furnace." "We call it the Well of Light," Elder Sarah said, her voice somehow cutting through the noise without shouting. She stood near a console that looked less like a computer and more like a pipe organ made of glass. "It is where the air surrenders the self to become the conduit." Nira was busy strapping a harness onto Rowan. It was a heavy, industrial-looking rig that anchored him to a stanchion near the edge of the well. "Stop squirming," Nira grunted, tightening a buckle across his chest. "If gravity inverts again, I do not want to have to scrape you off the ceiling." "You are enjoying this," Rowan accused, wincing as she yanked a strap. "I am enjoying the fact that for once, I am not the one having to fix the engine while it is on fire," Nira said. She slapped a transdermal patch onto his neck. "Anti-nausea, high dose. When she opens the channel, your equilibrium is going to try to exit through your ears." A soft chime echoed through the room. Nira tapped her earpiece. "I have a patch through from the station," she said. "It is Jack's, one-way audio. He says the comms array is melting." She pressed a button on her wrist. Jax's voice, distorted by static and breathless with fear, filled the pristine chamber. "Doc, if you can hear this, look, I moved the good whiskey to the safe in the basement. If the roof goes, do not let the rescue team drink the cheap stuff. And hey, thanks for the tab. I mean for everything. Tell the air she does not owe us anything. But if she pulls this off, drinks are on the house. Forever." The transmission cut with a sharp squeal of feedback. Rowan looked at the static-filled display. He felt a coldness in his chest that had nothing to do with the temperature of the room. It was the specific heavy coldness of losing a patient you knew you could have saved if you just had 5 more minutes. "He is preparing to die," Rowan said quietly. "He is preparing to endure," Arya said. She stood at the edge of the well. She had shed the white tunic and was wearing a suit of woven light fiber that clung to her like a second skin. It shimmered with every breath she took. She looked terrifyingly regal and utterly terrified. "He believes we have abandoned them," Arya said, looking into the violet abyss. "He thinks the kid is safe on a spaceship while he holds up the roof." "He knows you," Rowan said. "He knows you do not run." "But I did run," Arya whispered. "For 3 years I ran." Elder Sarah stepped forward. The lights in the chamber dimmed, leaving only the violent glow from the pit to illuminate their faces. "The time for running is past," Sarah said. "Doctor, listen closely. This is not a ritual of magic. It is a ritual of resonance." She pointed to the well. "When Arya steps into that column, her consciousness will expand. She will interface with the energy lattice of the sector. The storm will pour into her mind. It is loud. It is the sound of dying stars colliding asteroids and the magnetic screaming of the void." Rowan looked at the swirling chaos. "Sounds like a headache." "It is madness," Sarah corrected gravely. "The danger is not physical. It is psychological. When a mind touches that much power, it loses perspective. It sees the galaxy as a flowchart. Lives become numbers. Tragedies become statistics. That is how the previous heir died. He tried to balance the equation of 1,000 worlds, and he forgot that he was a person." Sarah placed a hand on Rowan's shoulder. Her grip was surprisingly heavy. "That is why she needs you, Doctor. You are the point anchor." Rowan looked at the harness, then at the abyss. "I am just here to hold her hand." "You are here to remind her of the mud," Sarah said. Rowan frowned. "Excuse me." Sarah looked at him with eyes that held centuries of starlight. "Did you truly believe, Dr. Hale, that it was a coincidence?" "What?" "That the heir to the Galactic throne just happened to walk into a bar on a forgotten mining colony, that she just happened to get injured in the one place where a disgraced military surgeon was hiding." Rowan felt a prickle of unease. "She said she was hiding. Ortis 4 is in the middle of nowhere. It is a good place to hide." The universe is vast, Sarah said softly. There are a billion places to hide. She came to Orbit Haven because of you. Rowan looked at Arya. She was not looking at him. She was staring fixedly at the storm, her shoulders hunched. 10 years ago, Sarah continued, her voice taking on a storytelling cadence. On the surface of Ortis 4, a human doctor refused a direct order. He refused to calculate the value of life. He chose to stay in the fire rather than accept the acceptable losses. Sarah tapped her own chest. We felt it. Rowan blinked. You felt it. The Luminar feel resonance, Sarah explained. Usually war sounds like noise, chaos. But that day there was a note of absolute crystalline clarity. A decision made with such profound moral density that it sent a ripple through the starstorm. It was a harmonious vibration in a sector of dissonance. Rowan was stunned. He remembered the mud. He remembered the cold. He remembered the smell of burning ozone and the crying of the child Alara. He had thought no one was watching. He had thought the universe didn't care. I was a child then, Arya spoke up, her voice small. She turned to face him finally. Her eyes were wet. I was on the training ship. I heard the ripple. I asked my uncle what it was. He said it was the sound of a singularity of conscience, a human who stopped the math. She took a step toward him. When my uncle died, when I saw him burn because he tried to save too many by loving none of them enough, I ran. But I did not just run away. I ran toward something. I spent 3 years looking for the source of that ripple. I looked for the man who stayed. Rowan felt the floor beneath him tilt, though the ship was steady. You were headhunting me. I was looking for a safety line, Arya confessed, tears spilling over. I knew that if I ever had to take the throne, if I ever had to let that storm inside my head, I would drown. I am not strong enough to love a whole galaxy, Rowan. I am selfish. I get scared. She reached out and took his hand. Her grip was desperate. I needed someone who was stubborn enough to tell a god that they were wrong, she whispered. I needed someone who would look at a burning star and worry about a single child with a broken leg. I needed you. Rowan stared at her. A complex cocktail of emotions swirled in his gut. There was shock, certainly. There was a bruise to his ego to realize that his heroic anonymity had been the very beacon that brought this chaos to his doorstep. He felt a flash of anger at being maneuvered, at being a piece in a cosmic game he hadn't known he was playing. But beneath the anger, there was something else. A profound sense of validation. For 10 years he had wondered if he was just an idiot. A fool who threw away his career for a gesture that changed nothing. The war had ended anyway. The planet had died anyway. Had his sacrifice mattered? Now, standing on the edge of the universe, he learned that his stubbornness had rung a bell that echoed across the stars. You could have told me, Rowan said, his voice rough. You could have knocked on the door and said, "Hello, I am looking for the stubborn idiot." I was afraid you would run, Arya admitted. I was afraid that if you knew I wanted to use you as an anchor, you would see me as a monster. A parasite looking for a host. You are not a parasite, Rowan sighed, squeezing her hand back. You are a patient. And apparently, I am the prescription. He looked at Nira. Is the harness secure? It will hold a Class 5 Titan, Nira confirmed, her eyes soft as she looked at the two of them. Rowan turned back to Arya. He stepped closer, invading her personal space, ignoring the terrifying drop into the violet fire just inches away. Okay, Rowan said firmly. Here is the treatment plan. You go in there. You grab that storm by the throat. And you do not look at the whole sector. You do not look at the Vega system. You look at me. Arya nodded, trembling. And if you start to slip, Rowan said, leaning in until their foreheads touched. If you start thinking about numbers, I am going to annoy you. I am going to recite the entire periodic table of elements. I am going to list every bone in the human body. I am going to be the most irritating grounding noise you have ever heard. Do you understand? Arya let out a watery laugh. I understand. Good. Rowan stepped back, checking his tether. Let's save the bar. Jax promised me free drinks. That is a binding verbal contract. Elder Sarah moved to the console. She raised her hands, and the glass pipes began to glow. The aperture is opening, Sarah announced. Her voice was no longer gentle. It was the voice of a commander. Heir, assume the position. Anchor, brace yourself. Arya stepped onto the platform that extended over the center of the well. She took a deep breath, spread her arms, and looked up at the crystalline dome. I am the Heir, she whispered, the mantra shaking in her throat. I am the listener. I am the bridge. Open it, she commanded. Sarah brought her hands down. The floor beneath Arya dissolved. There was no sound at first. Just a rush of pressure as the atmosphere of the ship met the raw energy of the starstorm. Then the scream hit. It was not a sound. It was a physical force. Violet light exploded upward, a geyser of power that swallowed Arya instantly. She arched her back, her mouth opening in a silent cry as the energy flooded her neural pathways. The ship bucked violently. Stabilize! Neera yelled, fighting with a manual override lever. Rowan was thrown against his harness. The light was blinding. He couldn't see Arya. He could only see a pillar of fire where she had been. Arya! He shouted. His voice was lost in the roar, but he felt her. Through the hand he had held, through the connection Sarah had spoken of, he felt a sudden terrifying expansion in his own mind. He wasn't telepathic, but this was different. He felt her fear. It was vast, cold, and drowning. Too much, her mind screamed. Too loud. Too many voices. Rowan saw flashes not with his eyes, but with his brain. He saw the Vega system burning. He saw the trade routes. He saw billions of lives as tiny, insignificant sparks of light flickering out one by one. The math was overwhelming. The numbers were crushing her. Save the core. The logic whispered, a cold, alien logic that wasn't hers. Sacrifice the rim. Amputate the limb to save the body. No, Rowan roared. He grabbed the tether that connected his harness to the platform and hauled himself forward, fighting the G-force of the energy displacement. He reached into the light. It burned, a cold electrical burn that felt like frostbite. He found her hand. Arya! He screamed. Look at me! Inside the pillar of light, Arya was floating. Her eyes were white voids. Her skin was cracking, lines of gold energy leaking out. She was dissolving. 112, Rowan shouted. The number echoed in the psychic storm. $112, Rowan yelled, reciting the first thing that came to his head. That is how much Jax owes the supplier for the synthetic gin. He keeps the receipt in a cigar box under the counter. Arya's head twitched. The white void in her eyes flickered. Jax. Kale. Rowan continued, pulling her hand harder. The miner. He has a laceration on his left bicep, 6 stitches silk suture. He has a wife on the colony world who knits terrible sweaters. He showed me a picture. The storm raged, trying to pull her back into the macro perspective, trying to show her the grandeur of the galaxy. Stop looking at the stars, Rowan commanded. Look at the mud, look at the bar. There is a scratch on table 4, where Vorn tried to carve his name with a knife. There is a leak in the coolant pipe in the hallway that smells like rotten lemons. Lemons. The chaos in her mind slowed. The vast, terrifying numbers began to recede, replaced by the specific, gritty details of reality. The little girl, Rowan said, his voice cracking with the strain of holding on. The one with the reptilian doll. She sits by the window. She watches the ships. Her name is Miri. If you let that roof fall, Miri dies. Not a statistic. Miri. 7 years old. She likes strawberry synth milk. Arya gasped. The white fire in her eyes receded, shrinking back into pupils, into irises. She saw him. She saw Rowan, his face contorted with effort, his uniform singing from the heat, holding on to her, like she was the only thing in the universe. "Rowan," she whispered. "Right here," he gritted out. "I am right here. We are not saving the galaxy today, Arya. We are just fixing a roof." "Can you fix a roof?" Arya closed her eyes. She took a breath, and this time she didn't let the storm drown her. She inhaled it. She took the screaming rage of the starstorm, and she filtered it. She pushed aside the vast, overwhelming currents of the sector and focused every joule of energy, every ounce of will, onto a single microscopic point in the void. Orbit Haven. Outside the ship, the violet clouds stopped swirling. They froze. Then, they began to move with purpose. Aaron Vale stood in the auxiliary observation deck, flanked by 2 guards. He watched the monitor with a cynical sneer, waiting for the inevitable explosion. He expected the air to crack. He expected the station to be crushed. "She is too weak," Aaron muttered. "She cannot hold it." Then he saw the readout. The energy density around Orbit Haven didn't spike. It stabilized. The chaotic waveforms of the storm smoothed out into a perfect sine wave. It was not a wall of force, it was a cradle. The storm clouds wrapped around the station, moving gently, matching the rotation of the struggling structure. The atmospheric venting stopped as the pressure equalized. The shuddering of the hull ceased. "Impossible," Aaron breathed. He looked at the tactical map. The storm in the wider sector was still raging, still wild. But here, in this tiny pocket of space around Ortis 4, there was peace. "She is not clearing the sky," Aaron realized, his eyes widening. "She is creating an eye. She is ignoring the ocean to save the boat." He looked at the energy signature of the air. It was entangled with another signature, a messy, biological human signature. "The anchor," Aaron whispered. "It is not a contamination. It is a lens." For the first time in his long life, Aaron understood the flaw in the Luminar philosophy. They had always tried to be the sky distant, impartial vast. But the sky could not hold a hand. The sky could not care. To save a life, you had to be small enough to touch it. In the well of light, the screaming stopped. The pillar of fire faded, replaced by a gentle golden luminescence. Arya lowered herself to the floor. She did not collapse. She landed softly, her feet touching the grate. The suit of light faded. She was just a girl in a tunic again. But she was different. Rowan released his death grip on her hand. He slumped back against his harness, his lungs burning, his head spinning. "Did we?" he gasped. "Did we do it?" Arya looked at him. She was exhausted. There were dark circles under her eyes and her hands were trembling. But her smile was the brightest thing in the room. "We fixed the roof," she whispered. She held up her hand. On her wrist, where Rowan had gripped her, the skin was not burned. It was marked with a pattern of intricate glowing lines, silver and gold interlaced. Rowan looked at his own wrist. The same pattern was there, a scar of light. "A bond mark," Elder Sarah said, stepping forward. She looked at the two of them with reverence. "The throne has accepted the duality, the heir and the anchor." Nira rushed forward, checking Arya's vitals with her scanner. "Heart rate is 120. Temperature is elevated. But neural activity is stable. Stable, you crazy kids actually did it." "Orbit Haven reports structural stabilization," the comms officer called out, sounding stunned. "They are sealing the breaches. Casualties are minimal. They made it." Rowan unbuckled his harness. He tried to stand, but his knees gave way. Arya caught him. "Easy, Doctor," she murmured, supporting his weight. "I think you need a checkup." "I am fine," Rowan lied, leaning against her. "Just next time you want to save the world, can we do it somewhere with a chair?" Arya laughed, burying her face in his shoulder. "No promises." Epilogue. 3 weeks later. The bell above the door of the rusted halo chimed. It was still the same harsh, discordant sound, but to Rowan, it sounded like music. The bar was busy. Busier than usual. The news of the miracle of the storm had brought sightseers, pilgrims, and opportunists to Orbit Haven. The station was no longer a graveyard. It was a destination. Rowan sat in his usual booth in the back. The scorch mark on the wall was still there. He hadn't scrubbed it in 3 weeks. He had decided to leave it. It wasn't a stain anymore. It was history. "You look terrible," Jack said, dropping a fresh mug of synthetic coffee on the table. "It is my natural charm," Rowan replied, picking up the mug. "How are the repairs coming?" "Slow, expensive," Jax grumbled, though he was grinning. "But the new structural supports are solid. Luminar Tech. Nira installed them herself. She said if I break them, she will break my fingers." "She is a charming woman," Rowan said. "She scares the hell out of me," Jax admitted. "I think I am in love." The door opened again. Arya walked in. She wasn't wearing a cloak. She wasn't hiding. She wore a mechanic's jumpsuit that was slightly too big for her, smeared with grease on the sleeve. She had been helping Nira and the station crews with the repairs. The bar went quiet for a moment. People looked. They knew who she was now. The heir, the savior, the girl who tamed the sky. Arya ignored the stares. She walked straight to Rowan's booth and slid in opposite him. "You are late for your shift," she said, stealing a sip of his coffee. "I am the doctor," Rowan said. "I set the hours. And you are supposed to be in a diplomatic meeting with the Trade Federation." "I skipped it," Arya shrugged. "Aaron is handling it. He likes talking about treaties and galactic harmony. He is surprisingly good at it now that he is not trying to murder people." "And Elder Sarah. She is on the ship, listening to the song. She says Ortis 4 is starting to hum in a major key. She thinks the planet might actually be healing." Arya looked out the window. The viewport was cleaner. Now Jax had finally paid someone to wash it. Ortis 4 was still a ruin, but the storm clouds were gone. The sun was shining on the cratered surface. "It is peaceful," she said. "It is quiet," Rowan agreed. He reached across the table and took her hand. The glowing scars on their wrists pulsed in unison, a soft, rhythmic beat that only they could feel. "Hey, Doc!" A shout from the front of the bar broke the moment. It was Vorn. The massive breaker yard worker was holding a bloody towel to his forehead. "I got hit by a hydrospanner," Vorn yelled. "It slipped," Rowan sighed. He drained his coffee and stood up. "Duty calls." "I will help," Arya said, jumping up. "You are the heir to the galactic throne," Rowan pointed out. "You do not have to hand me gauze." "I am also the point anchor's assistant," she grinned. "And I need the practice. My stitching is still crooked." They walked to the exam table in the corner. Vorn sat down, looking sheepish. "Sit still, Vorn," Rowan said, snapping on his gloves. "If you bleed on my clean floor, I am charging you double." Yeah, Vorn grunted. He looked at Arya, then quickly looked away, intimidated. "A nice day, Your Highness." "It is just Arya Vorn," she said, handing Rowan the antiseptic spray. Rowan began to clean the wound. It was a simple laceration. Routine. Mundane. "You know," Vorn said, wincing, as the antiseptic stung. "My cousin on the core world says you two are legends. Says you cracked the sky open and rewrote the laws of physics." Rowan threaded the needle. "Your cousin watches too many holovids. We just kept the lights on." Arya watched Rowan work. She watched his hands, steady, scarred, gentle. She watched the way he focused on the wound, treating a brute like Vorn with the same care he would treat a king. She smiled. She leaned in close to Vorn, her voice conspiratorial. "Do you know who is stitching you up, Vorn?" she asked softly. Vorn blinked, one eye open. "The doc." Arya's eyes shone with pride. "Do you know you are being patched up by the man who told the heir to the galactic throne that no life is acceptable to lose?" Rowan froze mid-stitch. He shot Arya a look of mock severity. "You are violating doctor-patient confidentiality," he grumbled. "That is a HIPAA violation," or the galactic equivalent. Sue me, Arya laughed. Rowan shook his head, but he couldn't hide the smile that tugged at the corner of his mouth. He finished the stitch, tied the knot, and snipped the thread. Done, Rowan said. Keep it dry. Come back if it turns green. Thanks, Doc, Vorn said, hopping off the table. He paused, looking at Rowan with a new respect. Thanks. Vorn lumbered back to the bar. Rowan stripped off his gloves. He looked at the station around him, the noise, the smell of cheap liquor, the people living their messy, complicated lives. He looked at the woman standing next to him who carried the power of a star in her veins, but chose to spend her afternoon in a dive bar. He looked at the scar on his wrist. He wasn't running anymore. He wasn't hiding in the mud. He was exactly where he was supposed to be. So, Rowan said, picking up a fresh scanner. Who is next? Arya grabbed a clipboard. We have a sprained ankle at table 6, and I think Jax burned his finger on the espresso machine again. Right, Rowan said, rolling up his sleeves. Let's get to work. Outside, the stars turned in their silent, infinite dance. But inside, the rusted halo, the music was loud, the drinks were strong, and the doctor was in. End.